This morning I visited the Governor-General and Her Excellency has accepted my advice that an election be held on Saturday, 3rd of May 2025.
In 40 years, there has not been a higher spending government than your government. Is that correct?
Well, that's not true, except for the one that you were a part of.
If we're to fix our defence force, unfortunately they're going to need to remove females from combat corps.
I stepped back one step. I didn't fall off the stage.
We're twisting this into something that wasn't.
Peter, this is more than that. This
Sarah,
is quite a backflip.
I have to say, we've made a mistake in relation to the policy. We apologise for that.
Election Countdown 2025.
For this campaign, we are doing a joint online phone bank with Victorian Labor and their Community Action Network in the second last week of the campaign on Wednesday, the 23rd of April at 6 p.m. We're going to probably have some special guests and you can set up comfortably in your lounge room or at your desk or wherever you want to do it. We're going to have some training. It's just a great way for all of the great listeners of Socially Democratic to come together and actually see each other. And we'll do a bit of a check-in and maybe have a couple of drinks and some beers online afterwards at the end of the phone bank as well. Sign up today. The links to register for the phone bank are in the show notes, and we'll obviously be punching it out through social media as well. Tell your friends, bring people along. It should be a fun night, and it's so important because every conversation that we have is going to shift a vote to Labor. So we really need to make sure that we get out there and bring this election campaign home for Anthony Albanese and the Labor team. But we'll have more on that in the coming weeks with our future episodes. The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in 2025, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members as well. And you can join our community for free or for as little as $1.50 a month. And you too can help support this podcast. All paid members receive a welcome gift. So if you have recently signed up, please check your inbox for a message from our producer asking for your shipping address. Because without that, then we can't send you your merch. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Maurice Blackburn has been fighting for workers' rights in Australia for more than 100 years. They believe the law should serve everyone and not just those that can afford it. So for empathetic and expert legal support, call Maurice Blackburn Lawyers today. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one on a Wednesday afternoon on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. And welcome to our second episode of our weekly election countdown series. It's week 2 of the campaign. Early voting starts in 12 days, 22nd of April. It's 26 days until voting ends, or 26 days to what we also used to know as Election Day. We've had our first leaders debate, our first policy backflip, and a whole bunch of other things in between. And to help me unpack the week that was from the campaign trail, I'm joined by my 2 Labor campaign experts who have plenty of election wins under their belt, starting with former Deputy Chief of Staff to 3-time winning Premier Daniel Andrews, and now Managing Partner at Foster, McCrone, Ratcliffe and Sims. Jessie, coming out of my cave, and I'm doing just fine because I've fixed my audio from last week. McCrone, welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Thank you for providing the microphone. The dedicated listeners will be very pleased to hear it.
A lot of feedback. And former federal member for Batman and campaign director, and also multiple election wins under his belt. And when he was an industrial officer of the TW, he would brag that he never, ever lost a case in the Industrial Relations Commission. I think it's because he said to me years later, I took all the easy ones and gave the hard ones to Richard Miles. David Feeney, welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Thank you. You made that up, but it's not too far from it.
Okay, so just to recap for everyone playing along at home, 150 seats in the House of Representatives, 76 needed to win. Labor's on 77, although the Prime Minister said in the debate last night, 78. Someone needs to remind him that we don't have Higgins anymore. And Coalition 53, 23 seats to win. Big mountain to climb for them. Let's start off with the debate. The People's Forum debate was on Sky News on last night, Tuesday night. I want to get top reflections from our 2 co-hosts, and then we might go through highlights and lowlights. Your top reflections to you, Jessie McCrone.
Okay, to start with, I would like to reflect that probably amongst our listeners, we are the few people who watched it, given the platform it was on. But secondly, the audience was far more left-wing than predicted, particularly by Stephen and David. This was the trottiest of Northcote, town hall debate questions that I think I've heard in a leadership debate. So I think that was an interesting reflection that the debate questions were far more to the left. I think that is part of the reason a few of Dutton's people are trying to argue that he won, even though the numbers after the debate made it quite clear that Albanese had won. The last thing I would say is that it didn't traverse any real new ground, which we predicted beforehand that really coming out of this with a draw would be a win for the Prime Minister. I would like to say that Dutton needed a little bit more, though. He needed to put a bit of pressure on the Prime Minister to take a risk, because my current view about how this campaign is rolling out, he needs to put something on the table to switch up the conversation. And right now, conservatism and risk aversion is not going to win it for Dutton. So he had an opportunity with the debate, especially after the backflip, which I'm sure we'll speak about a bit later. He didn't take it to sort of change the conversation.
Yeah, interesting things to unpack on that one for sure. David, what were your top line reflections from Tuesday night's debate?
Well, we talked beforehand about how these moments are full of risk for the participants, but so both of them managed to not have a catastrophic misstep, and as Jessie said, the panel voted Albo the winner. But I think Dutton was under a lot more excruciating pressure going into this debate because he's had such a bad week. I mean, I think the coalition, it wasn't quite wheels coming off territory, but the coalition has had a truly desperately bad week. And I'm sure we'll come back to this, but the backflip, the working from home, the policy amateurish, the lack of preparedness that the coalition has demonstrated over the last week, contrasted with Labor, just means that Dutton kind of crawled onto stage, really needing to stabilise a ship that was looking very shaky and very clumsy. And Albo did not have that pressure. Of course, it's worth noting too that Dutton's father had a health emergency in the hours before, and that can't have helped Peter Dutton either. I did listen a bit to Sky After Dark last night because occasionally I like to punish myself, and I was quite interested to hear they're kind of the MAGA leaning fruitcakes that populate Sky After Dark were very, very disappointed with Dutton's performance, and once again railing about the fact that the Liberal Party wasn't differentiating itself in policy terms sufficiently from the government. And of course, their solution to that is they need to go wildly more right wing. But I think, and they were using terms that I usually only hear from the United States, like uniparty, which goes to show the rabbit holes that Sky at Night are going down just get deeper and deeper. But I thought that was interesting that the right, the far right and right were very, very disappointed by the performance. And there is a sense that Dutton's got to do something in this campaign to change it, and he hasn't.
I wondered if the focus groups leading into the debate for the Liberal Party, the research from the focus groups for the Coalition's campaign are saying to Dutton, people think you're a prick. So we need you to not look like a prick in the debate. We need you to look reasonable. And he never really went after Albo in any way. Like the Gaza question was kind of an opening. I thought, oh, here we go. And he made a contrast argument to how he would have dealt with what was going on here in Australia in terms of, social
anti-Semitism.
harmony. But he never, I thought that's your chance to get stuck in Albanese, and he didn't take his shot. And so what it meant was it just was this boring debate. I wrote in my notes when we were doing the debate, I said, this is the most most boringest debate I've ever seen. Jessie's now in the kitchen defrosting the freezer, and our freezer self-defrosts. She is literally looking for excuses to not watch the debate.
I'm a good multitasker.
Stephen, we've been around this mulberry bush before. What you're suggesting would have been a mistake, because this is a live audience, and if they'd watched one of the protagonists pick up a club and start beating the other one, then the crowd would have recoiled in horror and said, "Oh my God, the bloodshed, this is terrible." And the Sky would have loved it. We would have loved it. Perhaps the ratings would have loved it, but the audience would have recoiled in horror, and the protagonist with the club would have lost the debate. This is why these debates are so utterly pointless, because you have to be desperately nice throughout so that the marginal voters in front of you don't recoil from you in horror.
Look, I will say there were two policy-based sort of messaging reflections I would make. The first is, I think Albanese was better on the economy than Dutton, and I think I've reflected in the last podcast that people in the Liberal Party have reflected to me that they don't have a good message on the economy, and I think that was pretty clear. He could not land a line on it. I think one of the best exchanges really was when Dutton got his question that he was allowed to ask the Prime Minister and said, "Are you not the highest spending government, since Gough Whitlam?" And Albanese would be able to say, "Well, apart from the one you were in," which was a great response. But Albanese had a phenomenal response to that more broadly about the economic message. I think the more interesting thing, though, was then when they talked about Medicare and health. I thought Dutton was very good. I thought Dutton did a great job of attacking the Prime Minister, where Prime Minister pulls out his Medicare card and says, "This is the only one you need." And Dutton says to the lady that asked the question, "Did you only need your Medicare card when you went to the GP last?" I thought that was a really good response. So there's actually been this it felt like they both over-prepared on the other person's strength and therefore outperformed them. And sort of goes to they're both very much trying to meet in the middle here. And I hate to agree with Sky After Dark, but they are going out of their way, both of them, to make sure that there is not daylight between them.
Yeah, but if that continues, that works more for Albo than it does.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Any other sort of highlights to come out of the debate? I think one of the highlights for me was the question from Janine, who was concerned about international students buying property, foreigners buying our farms, and Australia belongs to Australians. And thank you very much, Eva Braun, for that question. To you, Prime Minister, what's your answer? That was the only little flash that we got of good old-fashioned Sky People's Forums. There was none of that. Otherwise, even the questions were kind of tame, and that was the only literal highlight I took out. Oh, the other highlight I had was this one. The rapid-fire questions from Kieran Gilbert, who literally was falling asleep throughout the whole thing, and he had to keep on injecting himself into it just to kind of keep the patient alive. But at the end, with like 60 seconds to go, he just had these rapid-fire questions to both leaders, like, "So, Mr. Dutton, no cuts to healthcare?" And Dutton went, "No." And then he turned to the Prime Minister. "AUKUS still happening?" He says, "Yes." And it turns back to Dutton. "Ending this, cutting the work from home?" "No, absolutely on board with that one." "Are we going to keep Christ in Christmas?" "Yep, both is doing that." "Port Adelaide, can they wear the prison bars in the AFL?" "No, can't do that." Like, they could have done an hour of that and people would have walked away going, "Oh, I'm completely clear on what both parties stand for in this election." That would have been a more functionary debate.
I think Kieran Gilbert was the best performer of all of them. I think he did a much better job of injecting some enthusiasm and interest into the whole debate.
I'm interested
it's always
in
been a hopeless forum.
I know. We've got the
I
ABC
think
one next week.
Lends itself to being the anticlimax that it is every single time.
And it works for us. Every day, I would say, do a People's Forum. And I think I said that at the last podcast. Like, the People's Forum is absolutely a better platform for us. It is lower risk, apart from the very crazy questions you can get that are from way left field, and you can actually demonstrate some connection with people. I think that is a better campaign.
But Sky are so witless. I mean, what Sky wants is on-air violence. That's what they want, and the way to get that is
and the
way to get that is to get the two candidates on the podium with a moderator and let them go at it without an audience that will civilise them and rein them in.
Yeah, but you know this. You know that the Labor Party would not agree to a Sky News debate that was not moderated by real people. We just wouldn't.
Well, it shouldn't agree to one at all, in my view. But it is what it is. What it means, of course, is that the ABC debate of next week will be the first real debate.
Yeah, agree.
Because when it's only the two of them in the studio and they're staring into the whites of each other's eyes, that's when they do pull out the hatchet. And Stephen, to your point, that's when, that inane Gaza question, he could have just happily crunched it with a response, which is not something he's going to do in front of a live audience.
The other one that I loved earlier in the debate and it was clever it was risky when Dutton said, someone asked, raise your hand.
Kieran Gilbert did.
Yeah, Kieran Gilbert asked, raise your hands if, the cost of living is impacting you, or, in a detrimental way. And if anyone's ever been in in a union or any kind of party room where there's a vote and people are unsure and only one hand goes up and then others kind of put their hand up, and in the end, out of a room of there was 100 in the room, I don't think 10 people put their hand up, and Dutton goes, telling, isn't it? And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not at all. I reckon 9 people put their hand up because someone else did and thought, I guess I better put my hand up.
Yeah, that felt very flat.
Quite comfortable.
Yeah, actually, life's got a lot better, really. So anyway, the wrap-up was 44 members voted in favour of Albanese, 35 supported Dutton, 22 remain undecided. And Sky News managed to call it for the Liberal Party. Interesting. Let's turn to some of the more substantive things that happened during the week. And obviously the biggest one was Dutton and the Coalition's campaign backflipping on the working from home policy. Obviously what came out of that story was that there was a view that Dutton was struggling in particular with women, and this is a policy that is super, super popular post-COVID to women in particular. And I think it's important that we've got some gender balance on the show for today to talk about those experiences. David, you went to an all-girls school in Adelaide, so you're probably best to talk about this topic. Peter Dutton, does he have a problem with women?
Well, he certainly made one. This was a really terrible week for the Liberal Party, and let's just do a quick recap. So we've got Trump coming out with Liberation Day. Thanks very much, Donald. And how do the major parties in the middle of an election campaign respond to this? Well, the federal government comes out and does give a robust statement, but is mature, is prudent, is sensible, is reassuring. Says we're not going to respond. We're going to continue to talk to the United States, but this is not the act of a friend. Tick. What does Dutton do? I would have done a better job. I could have talked to the Americans. Evidently no. I mean, every single country in the world, Canada and Lesotho and everybody in between, got hit with tariffs. Even the penguins got hit with tariffs.
The Taliban got the same tariff rate as us, and I think the SNP did a better job of sticking it to Keir on that front.
So Dutton comes out with a statement that is just self-evidently nonsense and will be seen as such by anyone paying attention, and a lot of people pay attention to Trump. And then he says, we've got a broad relationship with the United States, including a defence relationship, and that should be on the table. So then every defence hawk faints. John Howard comes out and makes a statement that the defence relationship and the trade relationship shouldn't be confused or mixed. People come out and condemn Dutton for horizontal escalation of the US relationship, and he starts backpedaling. Oh, no, I didn't really mean that. So, boom, stuffed that up. Then he announces that he's going to get rid of his working from home policy, and he does that in the middle of school holidays when all of us parents are managing our kids and trying to work from home. What a doofus. And then, just in case you missed that catastrophe, he's stuck with an economic position where he said working from home and sacking 41,000 public servants was going to pay for his policy. And now he's not going to sack 41,000 public servants. They're just going to go through natural attrition using a magic wand. And so even the uninitiated and the poorly engaged are watching this clown show and thinking, well, he doesn't know how to handle international relations. He was all over the place and got contradicted by John Howard on defence and national security, and his economic policies aren't adding up. And then the poor bugger crawls into a debate where Sky are, going to do everything, including building him a Death Star to try and push him over the line. I think this was, as you can probably tell from my tone, just a terrible week for the coalition. Now, you only get one chance to make a first impression, and here they were at the starter's gun, just slipping on banana peel after banana peel after banana peel. And Labor, and we always thought Labor had some lead in its saddlebags, and this was going to be a tough election, and the campaign was everything. And Labor has been out in a professional, disciplined, prudent, sensible, grown-up way, a group of adults who've done their homework. And these guys are running around making it up as they go with crayons and butcher's paper.
Jessie, I want to go to you, but I actually want to frame it, the question, which is a question from one of our listeners, Ian Hume. He sort of says to it, I'm sure you'll be talking about Peter Dutton's audition for the Australian gymnastics team for the upcoming LA Olympics, but how does dumping this particular policy, the work from home policy, compared to other major dumpings of party policies during election campaigns? But he really wants to know what kind of impact does this have on a campaign that you have backflipped on something so early in a campaign?
I am very interested to see how this plays out, because there's a couple of things. I have previously had a candidate who has wanted to backflip during a campaign on one of their major election commitments. My line to them at the time was, can you name a candidate who went out with an election commitment, who backflipped during a campaign, who won? And I actually can't even think of many that have actually done it. Like, there's dumping of policies, but this is a major backflip during an election campaign. I can't think of many examples of that happening. I think it's particularly challenging for Dutton, who has, and I'm sure John Armitage, when he joins us in a minute, will speak to this as well, who has this clear frame that he wants to present himself in as a, you may not like what I say, but I will deliver, and you know where I stand. He has just taken a massive axe to his own framing. So whether it's a popular, not popular policy, in terms of trust and authenticity, he's taken a blowtorch to that. And I think that will be interesting. I have been asked this week whether I would have backflipped on it. Just to be clear, I would have never suggested that they go out with this policy in the first place. But I do wonder whether they actually haven't done more damage in not just downplaying as much as possible and trying to move the conversation on. Now, clearly this thing was such a stinker in their polling, like beyond anything we've ever seen, because while there has been a fair bit of briefing from the Liberal Party this week about this nasty sort of lies campaign running by the Labor Party, the Labor Party's campaign against this must have been so subterranean, I didn't notice it. Like, I have been back through their advertising on work from home. There doesn't seem to have been much. They're certainly amping it up now. It didn't feel like there was a full frontal attack across their front bench, and I'm not criticising that. They've certainly decided healthcare was where they should be, and they've been there. And as David said, they've been grown up. They've got a strategy. They're sticking to it. But this idea that it was in some way this Labor lie or Labor campaign that has pushed this back, I just think it was a stinker. I think that the business community have convinced themselves everyone hates it and then convinced the Liberal Party. But broadly, Labor has not been that keen to engage on this topic across the country. So it must have really been terrible in the groups, because I didn't see a massive campaign from the Labor Party to win votes off the back of it.
Can I just say a couple of things to reinforce Jessie's well-made points? The first is, in terms of how the Liberal Party executed this backflip, it could not have been more tragic, because they announced it as a backflip, and then they followed it up with an apology. No. I'm sorry. And everyone's going, well, what's he sorry for? Like, I mean, instead of coming out and saying, we have a new approach to this policy challenge, and our new approach is this, and, strong Voldemort expression on his face, he comes out with an abject apology. I mean, I just thought the framing of the backflip was remarkable. And the second point I'd make is, while he was only threatening to force public servants back to their workplaces, out there in the outer suburbs, they heard it as either everybody, or they understood that it would be the beginning of everybody.
Thin edge of the wedge.
And so you've got hundreds of thousands of Australians desperately trying to juggle their lives, who since COVID have been able to restructure their balance of life a little bit, and take that dreadful commute a little bit out of their lives, and they're in the middle of school holidays, so they're living the dream right now when this buffoon comes out with his backflip and apology. They just could not have done this worse.
I want to take the time to, and we're going to be doing this each week, bring a special guest into the episode just to hone and bring their own expertise into the conversation. And today we're going to be focusing on messaging and narrative. He's been on the show before. He's a social researcher and political researcher, worked on a number of campaigns, not just in the state of Victoria, but nationally as well for the Labor Party, and very successful at it as well. From Qdos Research, John Armitage, welcome back to Socially Democratic. John, I'm keen to get your reflections initially on the topic we're talking about here, which is this major policy announcement from the coalition to backflip on this work from home arrangement that clearly is very popular in the suburbs. What was your initial reaction when you heard this news?
The thing that to me is interesting about it is when you've got a leader, they're going to have various strengths and weaknesses. We've had quite successful nerds, and we've had quite successful gentle sorts of people, and we've had successful strong people. And I always reckon whoever your candidate is, whatever their strengths are, lean in and back them. So, I am getting to the point about the backflip, but if you look at the ads they've done on Dutton, they're trying to soften him. He's tough. That's his attribute. Like it's got negatives about it, which we are using, right? Like Labor is using this to say that nasty tough bloke will cut things. He doesn't care much about you, right? So it's being used against him. They're trying to soften that. Now, the backflip, as Jessie and Dave said about its sort of rarity and including the apology. Look, I mean, maybe you could get away with one. Imagine if you did another one. I mean, it just destroys this notion of the man having this strength of character and you might not like it, but I'll do it because it's the right thing to do by the economy or by the country or whatever it might be. So I think that is a sort of tonal danger, sort of undermining their own campaign, really, to have a backflip like that. But you've got to back that guy's tough, no matter what stupid things he says.
Can we broaden it out, John, the conversation? So, the last time you were on the podcast, we were talking about what we think the election narrative will be for both campaigns. We're now in sort of, through 1.5 weeks of the campaign. In terms of the framing of the debate, I'm interested to get your observations on it. I just went on the Liberal Party's various social media platforms and was looking through a lot of their content. Most of it's negative, and it's a lot of "we can't afford 3 more years of Labor" is their kind of catch cry, which is kind of building off of the whole, the bill we can't afford, but redone in a bit less effective way. What's looking at the Liberal Party to begin with? What's your take on the way that they're trying to frame this debate, and where are they trying to take this conversation?
Yeah, I reckon that's about right. But if I just take a step back, right, in elections, you don't really usually get the chance to create something new. An election is about the context of the times and what you've put in the bank in the last few years of opposition or government, right? So if we have a look at that, context of the times is cost of living. That should be shaving a couple of % off any incumbent government, maybe more. And the other thing I think is Trump, the whole sort of just the whole sort of anxiety that he creates just by being sort of off the leash and a bit unhinged. So what has the government done about the cost of living thing is they have peppered away at lots and lots of little things which actually aren't really going to solve the problem, because the problem's in the thousands of dollars, your wages compared to the costs, whereas your the things government's been able to do is help with your power bill and, relatively small tax cuts, etc. But they've done a lot of it. So they've been trying to put in the bank the idea that, cost of living crisis, that's awful and that's bad and everyone's suffering because of that, but we're sort of in your corner. They're trying to put something in the bank to dampen that. In fact, I'd argue really the government has put almost nothing else in the bank. They've avoided controversy, but they've got that a bit there. So then the Dutton message really is that, firstly, the cost of living's bad, isn't it? Yeah, okay, that's true. You probably don't eventually say that. That's just sitting there, and now it's all Labor's fault. Well, Labor's got that list of the rebates and the this and the that and the other little bits and pieces they've done. Where's the Liberals' list that they've been using to say, see, because Labor did it, Labor's the cause of this problem? They don't have to be real. You've got to have some things that you pepper away at.
Your 5-point plan. Your 5-point plan.
Yeah. It's like, here's the 5 things that Labor did to make the cost of living crisis worse. And why haven't they bothered to do that? It's lazy, really. But the reason they haven't done it is because Labor's getting belted in the polls because cost of living belts incumbent governments. So that in that sense, they haven't put much in the banks. When they now say cost of living's bad, it's all Albo's fault. Well, is it? I don't know. I mean, it's bad. It's definitely dampening Labor's vote. But is it really Albo's fault? Well, I mean, some will buy that, but others won't. So, and then you make a good point.
They have no economic story, do they? I mean, this is an opposition that just hasn't done any homework for 3 years. And now when they have to move swiftly on their feet and they reach into the filing cabinet, they discover that no shadow minister has written any policy of any substance at all.
And it looks like that's the same when you look at there, because it is the Australia Back on Track is the notional positive. And I don't mind a notional positive for an opposition that's actually obviously negative, because if you've got to get back on track, someone puts it off track, right? So that I don't mind that as a principle. But again, you'd think if it was back on track, it's absolutely going to be economic. You'd have all of these specifics that would be sort of driving that for you. And they sort of don't. Their plan is to things like back small business and improve the cost of living and fix the housing crisis. The list is fine, but there's nothing to draw
more blue skies, greener grass.
Yeah, it's not really able to draw your attention. And I think also the things that they have got that are a bit positive or they did put out there, the Go Nuclear thing, that was big and adventurous. It's not popular. Like, Liberal voters don't think it's a good idea. Like, nobody likes it. It's quite a clever device to be able to go to a local community where some people, actually not the majority, but some people don't like the offshore wind or whatever else it might be, and say, we can do climate action without giving you that ugly stuff because we're going to give you nuclear. But it actually doesn't add up as something that's particularly popular. The other thing that Liberals usually do, and I reckon they were lining this up, they were lining up to have a crack at China. They were lining up to have a crack at migration. And I thought you're right, Jessie, he did that really well. But it was pretty soft, right? It was deliberately pretty soft. And they'll also do, and some of their lunatic candidates are doing the, trans kids are bad or whatever they're saying that the weird, woke education system is doing, which they now don't give specifics to, because all of that stuff that they've always had for 25 years in their back pocket, that culture war stuff, all of that looks a bit Trumpy now, right? Like, Trump sort of owns cuts of the public service, which was one of the few things they're going to do. Trump owns all of that sort of angry anti-woke stuff. And hang on, Trump's the big risk. What's the thing that gets oppositions locked out of government? Looking like a risk. Always got to not be risky. You've got to be safe. Albo's running the campaign looking safe. They're running the campaign thinking, well, hang on, we usually like to run all this sort of, this sort of culture war stuff. Oh, geez, that'd look a bit Trumpy. We've already looked a bit Trumpy on our cuts to public service, etc. So I think, I'm sure you're right, Dave, this is a complete lack of homework, but it's either, that's what it looks like, is they haven't done anything. But that, or it's a pretty flawed strategy, is perhaps more generous in this case.
But
So
just on immigration... Oh, sorry, Jess, go ahead.
No, well, theoretically, how it should work, if you're the opposition, you should spend the first 2/3 of your opposition ripping through the government, just absolutely tearing them apart on anything, everything, trying to get a foothold. And then the last third is where you switch to your positive, to your agenda. Now, to some extent, when the nuclear thing happened, I was a little bit scared for the Labor Party because, again, Dutton was leading the debate. And he's actually not been terrible about that if you take into consideration the whole term. And I was thinking, this is an opposition that's doing its homework. It has not been distracted by internals. It is rolling out a 2/3, 1/3 negative positive. But that has all sort of fallen away since nuclear. And I do wonder whether they've been spending most of their time trying to manage the internals of what is a first term out opposition, which is not an easy thing to manage when, the history of the unpopularness of the previous government has to be managed through your internals. So I do wonder about actually how that's all worked out, because it did seem that they were on the right path on that front. Sorry, David.
I was only going to say that the interesting thing about their nuclear policy is their signature policy, they're not talking about it, and it hasn't featured in their campaign. And secondly, on immigration, I too thought they were going to do something more decisive on immigration, and it was easy to look at the United States and the United Kingdom and Europe in recent months and think, well, this is fertile ground. And I think if they'd announced some kind of moratorium or some kind of high-profile investigation, inquiry into the real costs of immigration, they might have got somewhere. But what have they done? They've picked on university students, overseas students, who, frankly, in the anguished psyche of the Australian voter, are the least threatening kind of immigrants. These are the ones who've been to our uni and now want to go and work as engineers or doctors or nurses.
Who bring money with them and
it's
stimulate
Victoria's
the economy.
largest export industry, as you say. So they've managed to find one corner of the debate, which is the least fertile from their perspective, and bounce around in there, which I think is just, again, another example of amateurish politics.
Well, one thing I've been thinking about, and I agree with everything you've been saying, and, both John and David in previous podcasts, we've been talking about, to your point, Jessie, before, about the discipline that they did have up until the starter's gun was fired, was good from Dutton. In January this year, David and I were despondent in that first podcast about the prospects of Labor being returned at this election. And I'm just now wondering, where's it all gone? But more specifically, thinking about the electoral math for the coalition to pick up those 23 seats, what are they actually offering those electorates that they're actually targeting, which is outer suburban, traditional, marginal seats, but also if they are genuine about trying to pick up seats in what would be deemed as Labor's traditional heartland of the western suburbs of Melbourne and Sydney, what is they're offering to those voters as well? Because I'm not seeing it, and this is one of my nominations for probably unanswerable questions at this moment in time. But there are 12 days to go before the actual election kind of begins, like where voter starts. You're running out of time. You are running out of time.
And as John said, they've got this carnivore as a leader, and they're feeding him a vegetarian diet. No one's going to be persuaded.
No. And look, I think he had the shape of it during the debate. He talked about how many migrants have been brought in the last 2 years. He said 1 million have been let in, and it hasn't meant one extra home, one extra doctor. But he didn't even say it that sharply. It was sort of a paragraph that kind of went through those things, but didn't clearly say he's been letting in a migrant a minute, and how many new houses has he built? Like, it's actually not that challenging. And I think...
And this is why our roads are congested and yada, yada, yada.
And despite your points, John, which I agree with in terms of the connection with Trump and migration, there is a way to do it. There is a way to do it and not look Trumpy. And I don't want to encourage the Liberal Party to do it, but I am similarly surprised that we've not seen that clarity of message from them. My second question, and I know I'm not running this podcast, Stephen, is probably to all of you. Would you be doing more in the negative space to connect Dutton to Trump? Like, are you running ads that connect those two people? And I know we don't have all the information and blah, 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 but we get to be fun commentators here. So, like, what do you think?
John?
Yeah, I would. I mean, there might be a practical issue there where a government of a day has got they are in government, and, they might have those sort of things they've got to worry about policy-wise, but
get a
I
union to run it.
To tear into it, like it just seems it's a gimme. Like Trump went from being this guy that's this sort of oddity of America to this sort of, this sort of unhinged and really dangerous proposition. I mean, if people over 50 check their superannuation, right? If you've checked it, it's down, and everyone will tell you it's because of Trump. And all this cost of living anxiety, which was, fortunately for the government, starting to ease as interest rate, wages going up a smidge, interest rates are down a bit. And now Trump's going to make it all worse again. It just seems like it's an absolute gimme. So, look, I get that they might have some strategic reasons not to. I would have hammered him on it. And it's true, right? Let's just go through the list of the things. Well, I won't bore you with it, but the list of the things that, you would associate with Trumpism, Dutton has said them all. Like, he has said things about migration. He turns his back on the stolen generations apology. He has said and done things about, climate, et cetera, et cetera. His brand persona can very easily be linked to that frighteningness of Trump. Hey, could I just say one thing here that I think is worth noting? If you look at the Labor negative, you'll be worse off under Dutton. And the Liberals' negative is Labor's bad. Now, this is probably cock-up rather than strategy, but as a general rule, think about this sort of roughly 5 classes of voters. You're rested on left or Labor people, you're sort of fair weather Labor people, genuine people who sit in the middle, and of course the other two that parallel that on the other side or matched up on the other side. The people you've got a reasonable chance of getting, and let's say from the Liberal Party's point of view here, they are either fair weather Labor people who at least partly identify as Labor, or they're genuine swingers who sometimes identify with the Labor Party. So saying Labor is bad is a good message when you know you're going to lose and you're actually just trying to shore up the fair weather Libs, right? So what you say is, at this election, this particular Labor Party led by that particular person is a problem, right? So they would be saying, they don't go out against Labor, they go out against Albo. We're not picking on people who would otherwise think that the Liberal Party's okay. We're just saying Dutton is a problem, right? We're honing in on him as a negative. Now, that is probably a stuff-up, but usually if you're going after the party brand that is defending your base, and if you're going after the leader, you're trying to take on the middle. That is a bit of a standard sort of a formula you might use. I do note that the Labor campaign is not very Albo, right? Because he's not very branded. It's sort of we or Labor or the government has done. It's not like a Kevin 07 super around the leader, but the Liberal Party negativism So Dutton's this big character in the election, in a sense, probably the most strongly branded of the two. We're leaning into the negative of that, and they're watering down the positive of his. It seems that's a mismatch to me.
But just to explore this exquisite timing, because as you say, John, Trump and Dutton share all of these issues and attributes, but at this moment in time, Trump has done something very important and annihilated his own economic credentials. To fix a $2 trillion trade deficit, he's wiped $7 trillion and counting off the US stock exchange. And so at this moment in time, economic orthodoxy and economic credentials have been wiped off the Trump and Trump-adjacent bandwagon. So as we know, sitting at the heart of the Liberal Party is its economic credentials bunker. The notion that the Liberal Party can manage money better, the notion that Labor stuffs the money and people hire the Liberals to come in and conduct repairs. So here at the heart of the Liberal Party is this economic bunker, and I think that bunker is wobbling at the moment for Dunn, because his international friend, his spiritual partner, is busy crunching it from one side, and his own incompetence has undermined it on the other. And Labor, on the other hand, I think has managed its economic debate in sort of over the last 2 weeks as well as one could imagine. And so I think Labor grenadiers are now getting into this bunker, and Dutton risks losing that central brand strength in this campaign.
A number of times in the debate at the start and at the end for Albanese's remarks, he used the term uncertain times. And I don't know whether or not they were using that prior to Donald Trump shutting down the American economy, but I certainly feel like they're going to be doing that a lot now going forward in a lot of their messaging. So, John, just to you.
Well, usually we don't use that because that sounds like economic uncertain times or security uncertain times, which leave us into, Liberal Party brand strengths. Well, hang on, it's Trump causing it, right? So it's the right, it's the crazy right that's causing the both, security, sort of like a military type security as well as money security problem. But see, every time there's a positive, if someone's strong, they might not be caring. If someone's smart, they might not necessarily be sort of in touch with the ordinary person. There's always the yin and yang. Not to say one's bad, it's just that one counters the other. So the Liberals have got this sort of, or had this sort of brand strength that, as David's articulated well, is weakening in this economic space. Well, what's the trade-off that they have earned over the years to their brand for being strong on the economy? They cut stuff, right? So, we're leaning into that. Dutton's cuts will hurt you. You'll be worse off with Dutton's cuts. So we're working really hard on the harm that is caused by their that space, whilst they're getting murdered by Trump in that space at the same time. And I think also, the thing I found is really interesting in the research I've done about nuclear is people are not that concerned about one of the things blowing up and being a sort of a mega disaster. As much as you'd think. We used to worry about that in the 70s and 80s. We don't seem to be as worried anymore. But they think it's really expensive. The brand association with nuclear is expensive. So then we've been able to say this nuclear policy, which is not popular, that he wants to do, is going to cost all this money, and all that money's got to come from, and we've got stuff about education, and our positive, I mean education, building homes, local manufacturing, climate, but mainly it's health is the good positive we're selling, and we're also selling him as the danger in health. So he's going to do this unpopular nuclear thing, spend a bomb on it, and the money's coming out of he's putting you at risk with services being worse, particularly in health.
Well, John, we really appreciate your insights as always. Could have turned it into one big long monster podcast, but I know that you've got busy things to do, and so do we. We need to get on with our nominations for the week. But thanks very much, John, for coming on the show today. And I feel that we'll have you back on the show before we close out this election campaign proper. So thanks very much.
Good on you. Thanks very much. See you all soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers, John.
Okay, let's get to this week's categories. We sent out a call to arms on our various social media platforms for Socially Democratic, and we've got a bunch of nominations back this week. But obviously, I want to hear from our guests, hosts as well. Starting with Tory with the typewriter nominations. Does anyone have David? Thumbs up on you, David. Would have one. David, what's your who are your? Is it one or many nominations for Tory of the typewriter this week?
I've confined myself to one, and it's one of my long-time favourites, Simon Benson at The Australian. Simon Benson often gets those jobs at News Limited that no one else is willing to take on. And his job at the moment is to try and insist that Dutton is very competitive in this election. And so his headline today, Election 2025, finally Peter Dutton finds his mojo in the leaders' debate. Finally, there is a contest. After a shaky first week, Peter Dutton needed to lift, and on Tuesday night he did it. Well, of course he didn't, as we've just discussed. But these guys just desperately rooting for Peter to try and turn this into a contest as they watch him melt like an ice cream on the beach.
The other interesting part about that is, because I think it was in The Australian that was?
That's correct, yes.
The Australian has, quite famously, very, very early deadlines. When they had a very nasty inquiry come in, it was always, and we go to print at 6. So you're going to have to give us your response. The fact that he's been able to squeeze that into the paper after writing it after the debate is actually just phenomenal. That was
to be fair, he may have written it a week
100% written before the debate.
Yes.
Well, interestingly enough, David, Jason P also sent in the same. I think he said Simon Benson's interpretation of the news poll is also a worthy nominee for Tory of the typewriter. I read that as well. I was also going to have what you just suggested there. That was going to be my hot take for the week. Congratulations, Simon. You've been nominated for 2. Lucky McCarthy has said everyone from the ABC, but particular certain journalists calling Dutton's backflip an about face. Why can't it be? Basically, why can't it be a backflip? Why are we trying to soften this as an about face? And someone else, the other Tory of the typewriter was Sky News declaring Dutton a winner, even though the people in the actual room said that Albanese won. In a room you stacked out with your own Tories, so that's clearly a Tory of the typewriter there. Probably unanswerable questions. Jessie, do you have one of these?
I do. I think the most interesting sport during a campaign is reading this background briefing that comes from both campaigns about why decisions were made and all those sort of things. And there was a very long in-depth about the work from home backflip. Part of what was being briefed out is that it was very frustrating for Liberals because they felt that it was distracting from their strongest thing that has happened, which is Albanese lying about falling off a stage and how that in groups is just landing. And I think that's an unanswerable sort of question right now. I do think that Albanese could have managed how he described that better. And I think it's a real question about whether voters think that is entirely, mate, you fell off the stage, just cop it, or not.
It shows desperate vibes and early as well. We've all been in those those losing campaigns where you are just clutching onto anything at this moment because deep down below the surface things are bad. And when I saw that, and also on the Liberal social media feed, just jumping all over it, and I'm like, mate, that is a non-starter. Like, no one gives a shit.
No one gives a shit.
Anyway, I do think that perhaps our answer should not have been Albo didn't fall off the stage.
Sure, but it doesn't compare to the national apology that Peter Dutton just gave us.
Absolutely not. But you're looking for unanswerable questions.
I'm really, really sorry about my policies.
And the other unanswerable question was the one I mentioned before, which is, when's Dutton going to make his move? He's running out of time. I fear for him. There are 12 days till the electorate starts to vote. His campaign is trending downward in the polls. There's no signature policy that's capturing the imagination of the voters. How are you going to turn it around?
Now, Stephen, I wouldn't want to let an episode go past, particularly during an election campaign, without me having something to say at least about those traitors to the unity of Labor, the Greens Party. And it's interesting to watch Adam Bandt's strategy in this election campaign. And I use the word strategy there very loosely. It seems like the Greens have decided that their campaign plan in this election is to describe themselves as a really effective lobby group with the Labor Party. And their campaign plan is, if you vote for us, we're very confident we can get a meeting with the Labor Prime Minister and ask him for stuff. And what are they? And we're going to ask him for dental as part of Medicare, and we're going to ask him for because at everything that Labor has achieved in government, of course, was our success, and every failure was, of course, Labor's failure. I think Adam Bandt preparing himself and his list of demands as a crossbencher is not a smart play by the Greens, and as we know, this is an election where the Greens, hoping to build on their 5 members in the lower house, may end up with only 2. So.
Yeah, no. Well, I've got Adam Bandt for another nomination later on. Most reluctant door knocker award. Stephen Gently's messaging Zoe McKenzie for the most reluctant door knocker. Check her socials. I actually tried to Google Zoe. I couldn't find her. I don't even know who Zoe McKenzie is. Is anyone who knows Zoe McKenzie is?
Well, Zoe's door knocking campaign has clearly been a failure. None of us know who she is.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Hasn't knocked on my door.
Any other reluctant door knocker awards this week, team?
If you'd like to spend some time on, which I unfortunately have, on the Young Liberals Instagram page and watch some little videos.
How much time do you spend on there?
Sadly, more than I'd like to admit, but I am now on this podcast admitting that I am doing that. They have a flying squad of door knockers, and I think every person that they interview, every candidate, the candidate was not on the door knock. The candidate, anyway, watch it. I think all of them are reluctant door knockers.
The things that they're nominating that people told them about
just did
if
not happen.
If anyone's ever knocked on a door, no one has ever said the things that candidate thinks that they just said.
Tim Wilson said, I'm hearing a lot on the doors that people are sick of having an MP that is sitting on the sidelines and they want someone who's going to be part of the government. I'm like, no one has said that to you. Yeah, no one.
Yeah. No. Whose surname is Wilson and his first name starts with Tim.
Well, stop door knocking your parents and go talk to voters.
I'm not sure Tim Wilson's parents vote for him. Hot take of the week. Hot take of the week has actually been sent in from someone who's anonymous. So it's Phil Curry wrote a column during the week. One of the early paragraphs, he says that it was about the backflipping of the policy about work from home. First, it annoyed women, not just public servants, especially as Labor and the ACT mounted a false but effective "you'll be next" scare campaign aimed at the private sector, right? So he was questioning that this, you'll be next. That's never going to happen. 800 words later, amid all of it, frustrated private sector employees struggling to get their people back into the office will be crestfallen, given both parties of government now agree furiously that there should be a right to stay at home at work a week. Like, how does he do this mental jiu-jitsu to jump by saying at the start that nobody wants that, but also this is the way of getting people back to working from home. You can't have it both ways. Anyway, thank you for that one. Melbourne in over my head nominations. I've got a couple here. Does anyone have any on that one?
Well, I just think Mandy Nolan, the Greens candidate in Richmond, who made an Adolf Hitler joke, probably not a great idea. Hitler was just having his kind of fun. The Greens, of course, are standing behind her. But I think, I think that's a challenge.
Yeah, it is.
I'd like to flag that at some point we may decide that Dutton is on this list. I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah.
But there is a question mark at this point about whether he's in over his head.
It's coming.
He certainly wants to be talking to key members of his shadow cabinet saying, what have you been doing?
Well, I mean, that's where a couple of nominations come from. One from Jason P and also one from Lucky McCarthy. Angus Taylor getting skewered by Billy Fitzsimons on the Daily Oz podcast was a thing of beauty. If you haven't seen it, check that out. And the other one, the Liberal Party vetting team, the Bennelong candidate failed to disclose fundraising as tied to a Beijing high roller. The Qyon candidate pitched herself as a renter whilst owning 2 properties. And the Bradfield candidate named in a workplace discrimination settlement with the Commonwealth. The Liberal Party vetting team are nominated this week for the Melbourne.
Well, and there was another one too. There was a candidate who said that women shouldn't serve in the military.
They deselected him, which makes them better than the Greens.
They did. Well, it's worse than a Hitler joke, isn't it? I mean, there's a few that are coming cropper here.
Yeah.
Marginal seat Hunger Games. I don't have any nominations for this one this week. Does anyone have any nominations for this one in particular?
Look, I've just heard a whisper, and I don't know this. It has not been confirmed, but I have heard that Maribyrnong is the seat to be at if you're in that part of the party these days. I would say I would look at the electoral margin there. I think Joe Brisky's a wonderful candidate. I think that maybe sending some of those people to Chisholm may be the way forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You've been banging this drum for a while now.
I just find this whole idea that there's a cool campaign to be on so offensive. As someone who has tried to pull people off the cool campaign to go to the very non-cool campaigns.
And it's cross-factional as well. It's not just a left or right thing.
No.
We're all guilty of it.
Yes.
We might have this phenomena where you do want those swings in the west and north of metropolitan Melbourne to stay below 7 and 8%, and that might require some effort.
You heard it here first. David's worried about Maribyrnong.
Well, maybe lose Maribyrnong on election night. I'll be taking this up again.
Maybe we need to add another category each week. Maribyrnong Watch. How's things in Maribyrnong going? Are we okay in Maribyrnong? The In This Economy Award. Do we have any nominations for that? I don't have any for that one either. But
it's got to be work from home, and I know he's done the backflip now. But if you actually conceive of that policy from the start, it's a cost of living election. The idea that you even open up the idea that you're going to force people onto public transport or to use petrol to get in the office, it was flawed from the beginning.
And it's such a policy designed and devised by a party that's just chock full of men.
It's just full of people.
They are not looking after kids during school holidays. I'll give you a hot tip.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any of my mates that I've got that have worked in the city, they hated COVID because they were like, oh man, I had to work from home and the frigging kids would give me the shits the whole time. They can't wait to get back to work. And it's just, this policy is literally designed by those blokes.
But I don't think it's fair to describe it as a backflip. It's a backflip and an apology. I mean, I think to get the essence of this Liberal Party disaster, you've got to add it to the apology. Dutton always gets a lot of heat for walking out on the apology, but he's made his own now. So.
Very good, David. The Teal Temptation Trophy. So this is for a major party candidate who suddenly starts talking like a community independent. We've got a couple of nominations here. I think some of them a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I'll go to any of you two. Do you have any nominations for this one? Jessie?
I think the real watch here has to be on the Liberal Party. I think the more this campaign heads in this direction, which we all hope it will, I think you'll see all of those candidates suddenly pick another colour.
Which they're prone to do anyway, really. Let's be honest. The other nominations we got, this was one of them was anonymous. Katie Gallagher's baby pink T-shirts are almost a contender for category of Labor candidate trying to look like an independent. Cheeky.
That is true. That is true.
Cheeky.
She's got this deep anxiety about Pocock knocking her off, and her coming third behind Pocock and a Liberal candidate. She's a very well-known and very popular figure in Canberra.
Yeah.
Well, Jessie, you know this better than I do.
Yeah, she is.
I don't think her anxiety is well-founded, but you won't shake her out of it.
This woman has the best policy platform to go against the Liberals as well. Like, literally, a quarter of the electorate's jobs have been threatened by the Liberal Party.
Yeah, and she's a great performer in the government.
She is.
Like, it's tick, 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 tick.
And Canberrans are a little bit more inclined to think about the mechanics of government and all of those sort of things. And Katie Gallagher has the broadest platform in government that nearly any federal Canberra MP has ever had.
Yeah. I mean, running against Pocock would be frustrating because he's all things to all people and his shit doesn't stink. But
absolutely, a bunch of people run against those type of Greens type candidates.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. I lived that dream for a while. Yeah.
The last one for the Teal Temptation Trophy is actually Adam Bant. We got a mailer from him this week, David. Really hard pressed to find the word Greens on the flyer, and the word independent was sprayed throughout the mailer. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it had the Greens logo at the bottom, and that was it. That was it. It was all independent, your local voice, your independent voice.
This is something we should return to, but I think there was a moment in time, maybe four months ago or so, when it was the Greens started to go south in polling, and there was a theory run through the media that this was because the Greens had taken up such a hardline position and such a prominent position with respect to Gaza that it was they were getting some electoral blowback on it. And I think the Greens sort of did switch tempo at that point. And I wonder if that's what this is, that Bant found that living his Bolshevik dream wasn't working for the party and has had to be reined in.
Takeaways from the Green candidate that was unsuccessful in trying to hold the seat of Paran at the last state by-election here in Victoria was that the Greens never had a answer for crime and safety, particularly for the residents near and around Chapel Street. And the homeless and the impact it was having on it. And she was critical. She was openly critical of the Greens in terms of being ignorant and not wanting to acknowledge that as an issue with the voters and to come up with some solutions to it. And that's one of the reasons she said that she thought she lost. It was because even progressives living in those communities are saying that our neighbourhoods are sort of changing and we don't like it.
It's the San Francisco and New York phenomenon.
It really is, yeah.
But it's interesting, mostly the Greens do very well in by-elections because, especially ones that aren't going to change the government. It was intriguing at this one. It actually forced the Greens into areas where they normally just don't even have to play. Whereas most by-elections, they do better than normal. In a general, I think the safety thing is less of a problem for the Greens.
Yeah. Closing out, who won the week? Jessie, I'll let you go first and then David.
Look, Labor won the week. I think, though, more importantly, the Libs lost the week. Labor is doing a very good job. They're not dropping any balls, but this week was fundamentally lost by the Liberal Party.
Mr. Feeney?
Completely agree with that analysis. Labor had a good, thorough week, but they were engaged in mortal combat with someone who just could not stand up without falling over. And I think the Liberal Party campaign is now, there's some very real question marks over the people, the thinking, the political instinct, the research. I mean, how is it that this working from home policy had to be dumped in the first week of the campaign? Weren't there pollsters and their policy people talking for months and months and even years? That's a surefire sign that they have not integrated the work of their party organisation with the work of their campaign planning. And I think that speaks to the fact that this is a very amateurish operation. Let's see how they go next week.
Well, remember that we'll be back next week with both Jessie and David to recap week 3 of the campaign, including the leaders. There'll be another leaders debate on the ABC, and we'll also be joined by a special guest, Benita Kolovos from The Guardian. She's a state rounds reporter here in Victoria to unpack the role of the media coverage from both campaigns. And don't forget, if you want to volunteer your time on the Labor campaign, all of these local campaigns need folks to knock doors and make calls and speak directly to voters. This election is going to come down to the wire. A handful of votes in a handful of seats. So every conversation will be the difference between holding a seat or losing a seat. So to get involved, sign up at alp.org.au and someone from one of the local campaigns will get in contact with you. And special thanks to Travis Dunn, who joined as a team leader on our Patreon community. Appreciate your financial support of Socially Democratic. Travis, thanks so much. To David Feeney and to Jessie McCrone, thank you for your contribution today. And also thank you to John Armitage for coming on the show today. We'll have another interesting week of this campaign and look forward to chatting again in 7 days' time.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Cheers. Nice to see you again.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Socially Democratic. Like the podcast? Hit the follow or subscribe button and be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser and get all the latest updates on Socially Democratic by following us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky and LinkedIn. See you next Friday.